She thought it was over. The kind of over that leaves a quiet emptiness, a space where words used to live. Rain tapped against the window, soft and rhythmic, like it was marking the slow passage of a tense night. She had said everything she needed to say, every fear, every frustration, every doubt. She had laid her heart bare, and she believed that was it. She believed she could finally breathe, step away, and leave the tension behind. But the pause in the room told her differently. Her hands shook slightly as she held her cup of tea, gripping it harder than necessary. The warmth of the liquid did little to ease the cold creeping into her bones. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting long, moving shadows across the walls of her small apartment. Shadows that seemed to stretch and twist just like the emotions twisting inside her chest. She had prepared herself for a sense of finality, for the kind of closure that feels clean and conclusive. Instead, she was met with hesitation, a gap between what had been said and what was about to come. He stood in the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame, silent and still, as if the world had slowed down around him. His eyes held something she wasn't ready to name, something more vulnerable than she had ever seen in him before. Normally, he was confident, even stubborn, but tonight he seemed tentative. She had been ready to close this chapter, to step away with her dignity intact, but now that certainty wavered. A small, dangerous spark of curiosity caught inside her, keeping her rooted in place. "I think we need to talk," he said, almost a whisper, yet loud enough to make her chest tighten. The words were careful, deliberate, and for a moment she doubted she had heard him right. Their past had been filled with arguments, misunderstandings, and silent treatments, but this tone was different. It carried weight, honesty, and perhaps a hint of apology that made her heart ache in ways she hadn't expected. She sighed, setting her cup down with a soft clink. The sound seemed louder than it should, echoing slightly in the still room, marking the moment like a small punctuation point. She had braced herself for an ending, a final word that would let her walk away and finally feel peace. Instead, she was staring at an opening she hadn't anticipated, a door that might swing either way. He moved closer, cautiously, as if aware that even a small step might tip the fragile balance of the night. There was respect in his movements, a silent acknowledgement that whatever came next mattered. "I know we've said a lot tonight," he continued, his voice quiet but steady, "and I understand if you don't want to hear more, but there's something I need to say." Her chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to turn away, to protect herself from disappointment, yet something held her still. She realized that she had loved him quietly, secretly, and fully, even when she hadn't admitted it to herself. And now, to walk away without hearing him out felt like leaving a page unfinished in her own life story. He paused, taking a slow breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to heighten the tension. She felt the weight of that pause pressing against her, each second heavy, as if the air itself had thickened. She had expected closure, imagined it, even craved it. She did not expect this lingering, unspoken potential for something more. Her eyes stayed on him, searching for any hint of what he might say next. She tried to steady her own breathing, but it was hard. Her heart had started to beat faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. The way he looked at her now, with cautious intensity, made every old memory of laughter, arguments, and quiet evenings together flash through her mind. She realized that this night could shift everything. One sentence could change the course of their story forever. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. She swallowed hard, unsure if the lump in her throat was from nervousness, hope, or a mix of both. The moment was delicate, fragile, and charged. Whatever he was about to say next might either close the door completely or crack it open in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. She found herself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by a force she couldn't name, wanting to hear that one sentence he seemed to be holding back. The rain continued to tap against the window, filling the pauses in their conversation with a gentle, steady rhythm. It was almost comforting, a soft counterpoint to the tight coil of emotions in her chest. She had always loved the rain. It seemed honest, unhurried, and patient. Tonight, it mirrored her own feelings, a steady persistence, a quiet insistence that something was not yet over. He finally spoke again, and even before the words reached her ears, she felt the shift in the room. There was a certain weight, a gravity in his voice that made her pulse quicken. She realized she had been bracing herself for silence, for the finality of goodbye. But now she understood that goodbye might not come tonight. Something else was waiting, something tender and potentially transformative. Her mind raced with all the possibilities. Would he apologize fully? Would he confess something he had held back for too long? Or would this be a night of revelations neither of them had expected? She could feel the tension stretching between them, a rope pulled tight, ready to snap or to hold firm. She wanted to turn away, to preserve the small sense of control she thought she had. But her feet refused to move. Her heart refused to stay still. As he stepped closer, she noticed the small gestures, the slight hesitation in his movements, the way his fingers twitched, as if he were gathering courage. He wasn't the same man who had argued with her earlier. He seemed open, raw, honest. She realized that what she had mistaken for closure might have been just the calm before the real conversation, the real moment that could define them both. The room felt smaller, the night tighter around them, as if it had conspired to bring them together. Each sound, the rain, the soft hum of the heater, the clink of her teacup, felt amplified, a soundtrack to the unfolding tension. She had expected the night to end quietly, but it was anything but quiet now. It was alive with possibility, danger, and hope. Her gaze stayed fixed on him, and she noticed every detail: the slight furrow of his brow, the curve of his lips, the way his eyes softened when they met hers. She realized she had never truly seen him like this before, not in moments stripped of anger, distraction, or pride. Tonight, she saw him fully, and it made her pulse quicken, her chest ache, and her heart hope. Then, almost in slow motion, he spoke. One sentence, carefully measured, full of meaning, full of weight. One sentence that changed the night entirely. Her heart skipped a beat. The words were gentle but insistent, and they carried with them a promise she hadn't dared to expect. Suddenly, she realized the night wasn't over. Not yet. It was just beginning. The rain, the shadows, the quiet, all faded into the background. There was only this room, only this moment, only the space between them filled with unsaid words, possibilities, and unspoken emotions. And in that space, she understood that everything could change with one more sentence. Her hands relaxed slightly, her heart raced, her mind spun with anticipation. This night had started as an ending, but now it felt like the start of something else entirely, something neither of them had planned, but both had longed for without knowing. She leaned in, just a fraction, willing herself to listen. She knew that whatever came next could transform everything, the past, the present, and the future all at once. And as she waited for him to speak again, she felt a mixture of fear and hope, the kind that makes every heartbeat count. The rain outside whispered against the windows, the night stretched infinitely, and the room seemed to hold its breath with her. She realized that endings were sometimes just beginnings in disguise. And tonight, she would find out which it would be. The moments stretched. She waited, holding her breath, afraid to blink and miss a single nuance. He stepped closer, just enough that the space between them felt electric, but still respectful, still careful. His eyes searched hers, and she felt like he was seeing everything she had tried to hide, everything she had tried to control. "I've been a fool," he said softly, almost a whisper. The words landed like tiny stones in her chest, making it thump in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She had expected an apology, yes, but the honesty in his voice made it feel like more. It felt like an opening, a chance to rebuild something fragile and beautiful from the pieces they had scattered over months. She took a step back, uncertain how to react. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from hope that might break too quickly. But another part, the part that had been quietly yearning, wanted to hear more, wanted to believe. She felt her heart pulling her forward, even as her mind whispered caution. "I didn't realize," he continued, his voice catching slightly. "I didn't realize how much I needed you in ways I didn't understand before. And I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately, or even to say anything right now. I just needed you to know." Her chest felt tight. Every nerve in her body seemed alive. The words weren't dramatic or flashy, but they were honest, and that honesty hit harder than any grand gesture could. She remembered the fights, the misunderstandings, the silent nights when they had both pretended to be okay. And now, hearing him speak like this, she felt a warmth spread through her, soft but undeniable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, and the world felt like it had shrunk down to this one room. Every memory of the past months, every small moment of laughter or hurt seemed to replay in her mind. She realized she had been waiting for this, not for a perfect apology, not for a flawless explanation, but for a moment of truth where the walls came down and they were simply two hearts speaking honestly. She finally found her voice, trembling just slightly. I needed to hear that," she admitted. Her hands were still clenched lightly, but the tension in her shoulders had eased just enough to let a fragile sense of relief in. "I didn't know if you ever would say it." He smiled faintly, a small, almost shy smile that made her chest ache. "I should have said it sooner," he said. "I kept thinking I was protecting us, but I realize now that hiding feelings only made things harder." The room seemed to breathe with them. She felt a mix of emotions, relief, hope, a flicker of fear, but mostly a sense that maybe, just maybe, they weren't finished. Maybe the night still held something unexpected, something that could rewrite the story they had both been living. She took a cautious step forward, closing some of the distance he had bridged. "I don't know what comes next," she said quietly. "I thought I did, but now I'm not so sure." "That's okay," he replied. His voice was calm, gentle, patient. "We just need to start somewhere." She looked down, feeling the weight of everything, the moments lost, the things left unsaid, the nights spent alone in thought. And yet, as she looked back up at him, she saw something that made her chest lift. Sincerity. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing. He was simply being real, and that honesty made the room feel lighter, warmer, safer. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window, making the rain tap faster. She shivered slightly, though not from cold. Her emotions were running high, swirling with anticipation and cautious hope. She realized she had been waiting for a moment like this, a moment that made the nights of uncertainty and frustration worth it. He extended his hand slightly, not asking, just offering. "If you want, we can figure this out, together," he said. There was no pressure in his words, no demand, just an invitation, quiet and tender. Her hand hovered over his, unsure at first, but then she took it. Just a touch, a connection, but enough to make the tension in her chest ease, enough to let hope in where fear had been. She felt the warmth of his skin, the subtle squeeze of his fingers, and it made her pulse quicken. They stood like that for a moment, neither speaking, just letting the rain and the quiet fill the space around them. She realized that sometimes the simplest gestures carried the deepest meaning. A hand held, a glance, a whispered truth. All of it mattered more than apologies or explanations could ever do. Her thoughts raced. Could they really start over? Could they rebuild trust, rebuild closeness, rebuild what had been broken? And yet, looking into his eyes, she felt a strange sense of certainty. Maybe this night was their chance. Maybe the night had been waiting for them to let go of pride and let honesty lead the way. "I've missed this," he whispered. "I've missed you." Her heart leapt. The words were simple, but they carried weight, a promise, and a longing she hadn't admitted to herself until now. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let the past stay in the past and let the present guide them forward. Outside, the rain slowed, turning to soft droplets sliding down the glass. The world seemed quieter, stiller, as if it were holding its breath with them. She realized that endings were rarely neat or immediate. Sometimes endings were a pause, a breath, a moment before a new chapter began. She squeezed his hand just slightly and nodded. "We'll take it slow," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "We'll see where this goes." "Slow is good," he replied. "I just want to be with you, honestly, fully, if you'll let me." Her chest tightened again, but this time it was different. This was not fear or doubt. This was anticipation, hope, and the flutter of something tender stirring inside her. She had thought the night would end in silence, in finality, but now it felt alive, full of possibility, full of unsaid words waiting to be spoken. And just like that, she realized she wasn't ready to let go. Not tonight, not yet. The rain continued to tap lightly against the window, a soft reminder of time passing, but the room felt suspended in its own bubble. Every heartbeat mattered. Every glance, every word, every pause carried weight. She understood that life sometimes gave moments like this, moments where one sentence, one gesture, one choice could tilt everything in a new direction. And tonight, that sentence had tilted hers. Her mind swirled with questions, possibilities, fears, and hope. But underneath it all, one thing felt certain. The night wasn't over, not by a long shot. And in that certainty, she felt her heart open, just a little, to the chance that this could be something more than she had ever imagined. The rain had finally slowed to a whisper, leaving the streets glistening under the faint glow of streetlights. Inside, the room felt warmer, charged with a quiet intensity. She stood there, holding his hand, feeling a strange mix of relief, hope, and lingering uncertainty. Tonight had started as an ending, but now it felt like the opening of something fragile, something waiting to grow. He looked at her, his expression soft but determined. "I know we've had our share of mistakes," he said, "but I can't ignore this anymore. I can't ignore us." She swallowed hard. Every word from him struck her with clarity. She had thought she had moved past the hurt, past the tension, but hearing him say this made her realize she hadn't. She had just been surviving it. Now, hope was breaking through, and it scared her more than she expected. "I don't know what the future holds," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to close the door completely." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of her decision. She was letting herself feel, letting herself hope, letting herself be honest. He stepped slightly closer, careful to respect the space they both needed. "Then let's just start with this moment," he said. "No promises beyond now. Just here, together." The simplicity of his words calmed her in ways grand gestures never had. She realized that love wasn't always about dramatic declarations or perfectly timed confessions. Sometimes it was about presence, honesty, and choosing each other again, even when the path forward was unclear. She nodded slowly, letting a small smile escape. "Here, together," she echoed. Her fingers squeezed his, a quiet affirmation of her willingness to try, to take a step forward, even when she couldn't see the full path ahead. The room felt different now, lighter yet charged. Memories of arguments and silent treatments lingered like shadows, but they didn't dominate anymore. Instead, there was a delicate balance, acknowledging the past without letting it control the present. They were finally speaking the truths that had been buried beneath pride and fear. "I've wanted to say this for so long," he murmured, almost shyly, "but I didn't know how. I thought you might not feel the same, and I didn't want to risk losing you completely." Her heart twisted. She had felt the same, held back by fear, by uncertainty, by the thought that he didn't need her as much as she needed him. But now, hearing him voice it, she felt an invisible weight lift, replaced by a fragile sense of possibility. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I feel it too, more than I thought I could." His eyes softened, shimmering with the emotion he rarely displayed. "Then we'll figure it out," he said simply. "One step at a time. No rush, no pressure. Just us." She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief, from hope, from the beauty of a moment she hadn't thought she'd get. She realized that life wasn't about avoiding mistakes or heartbreak. It was about moments like this, raw, honest, and full of potential. For a while, they just stood there, holding hands, letting the quiet fill the space. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside their hearts had only begun to settle. Every glance, every touch, every unspoken thought mattered. She felt connected to him in ways words couldn't capture, as if they were sharing a silent understanding that bridged all the distance that had existed before. "I never want to take this for granted," he said after a moment. "I don't want to wait another day to be honest with you. You mean too much to me for that." Her chest tightened again, but this time it was warm, like a fire gently spreading. "I feel the same," she said, voice firm despite the fluttering of nerves. I want us to really try." He nodded, relief washing over his features. "Then we will. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, to be right with you." She smiled, a genuine, quiet smile that reached her eyes. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't resolved, but it was real, and real was enough to start. They moved to sit closer, still holding hands, still sharing the warmth and the quiet comfort of presence. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his palm, and it grounded her, made her feel safe even amidst the uncertainty. Tonight wasn't about grand declarations or sweeping gestures. It was about honesty, connection, and the promise of a chance. Outside, the world seemed to slow. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt, and the city hummed softly in the distance. Inside, the night stretched quietly, allowing them to savor the fragile new beginning. She realized how much she had missed this, the simplicity, the presence, the gentle acknowledgement of love that didn't need to be shouted to exist. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, a small, careful gesture, and she felt warmth bloom inside her chest. It was a touch filled with care, with intention, with understanding, a touch that spoke louder than any words could. "I've waited for this moment," he whispered. "I didn't know if it would ever come." She leaned slightly closer, letting herself feel the gravity of the night. "It's here now," she said softly, "and we can hold on to it." The room held them in quiet intimacy, not in the physical sense, but in the closeness of shared honesty, shared vulnerability, shared hope. She realized that the night hadn't been over. It had been preparing them, giving them a chance to reset, to reconnect, to see each other clearly after so many missteps. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, letting the tension slip from her body. He held her gently, as if he understood how much trust it took for her to allow this closeness. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft glow of the room and the lingering scent of rain, she felt a spark of certainty. They weren't perfect. They had mistakes behind them, regrets, and lingering fears. But right now, they had honesty. And sometimes, honesty was enough to start over. They stayed like that, quiet, simply breathing in the comfort of being together. No words were needed for a while. Their hearts spoke louder than any sentence, louder than any apology. They had paused the world for this one fragile, glowing moment. And even as the night deepened, she realized something important. Endings weren't always final. Sometimes they were just pauses, waiting for one more word, one more choice, one more step. And tonight, that step had been taken. But just as she thought the night had settled, she felt a shift, a subtle change in the air, a hint that the night had one more surprise, one more heartbeat of revelation waiting to come. The quiet between them stretched for a few heartbeats, soft and steady, yet heavy with unspoken possibilities. She lifted her head from his shoulder and looked at him, really looked, noticing every line, every expression that carried the weight of honesty. Tonight had started as an ending, but now it felt like the beginning of something, delicate, something fragile, yet alive. He gave her a small, nervous smile. "I'm glad you stayed," he said quietly. "Even when it felt easier to walk away, you stayed, and that means more than I can say." Her chest tightened, and a warmth bloomed there. "I didn't stay because it was easy," she replied softly. "I stayed because it mattered. You mattered." Her words hung in the air, raw and true, carrying the weight of months she hadn't known how to express. He nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "And I've realized how much I've taken for granted," he said. "How often I've let pride or fear get in the way of something that should have been simple, us being honest, being together." She reached for his hand again, holding it firmly. "We've both made mistakes," she admitted, "but I don't want the past to decide our future." Her voice wavered slightly, but there was determination behind it. She wanted this night to be a turning point, a moment that they could remember as the start of something real. He squeezed her hand gently, a gesture full of reassurance. "Then let's promise to do better, to be honest, even when it's hard, to face things together." She nodded, her heart fluttering with hope. "I want that," she said. "I want us to try, truly try." For a few moments, they just sat there, letting the silence wrap around them like a soft blanket. The tension that had gripped her chest earlier softened into a quiet comfort. She realized that sometimes the simplest moments carried the most meaning. Holding hands, sitting close, and speaking honestly, that was enough to remind her why she had cared for him all along. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "I've missed this," he whispered. "The quiet moments, the laughter, even the little arguments. I've missed everything that made us, us." She smiled faintly, a mixture of nostalgia and hope. "I've missed it too," she admitted. "Even the arguments. They meant something, because they were with you." The rain outside had stopped completely, leaving the night still and calm. The world seemed paused, waiting with them, holding space for something that neither of them had dared to fully imagine until now. She realized that life often gave second chances in small, quiet ways, and tonight had become one of those moments. "I don't want this to be just a fleeting night," he said, voice steady but gentle. "I want to take the time to rebuild, to really be here, for real, with nothing hidden." She nodded again, feeling the truth of his words. "I want that too," she said, Slowly, carefully, but truly. They leaned back slightly, letting their hands rest together between them. Every heartbeat, every small movement felt heightened. She noticed the soft rise and fall of his chest, the faint warmth of his skin against hers. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was simple, quiet, honest, and somehow that made it feel monumental. A soft knock at the door startled her slightly, reminding her that the world still existed outside their bubble. But she didn't move immediately. Instead, she let herself savor the closeness, the connection, the sense of hope that had been absent for far too long. "I know the world outside is still waiting," he said, following her gaze, "but for now, let's just be here. This moment is ours." Her heart lifted. The night had shifted so completely from what she had expected. She had anticipated silence, endings, and closure. Instead, she had found honesty, presence, and the quiet promise of a future she had been too scared to hope for. She tilted her head slightly, a small laugh escaping. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," she admitted. "Like, maybe things could really change." He smiled, brushing his thumb lightly over her hand. "They can," he said softly. "We just have to want it. And I want it more than I can say." She felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of emotion, the relief, the hope, the realization that hearts could reconnect, even after months of distance and misunderstanding. She realized that love wasn't always loud or grandiose. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and persistent, and tonight had shown her that persistence could change everything. He leaned back slightly, giving her space while still holding her hand. "We don't need to rush anything," he said. "We just need to be honest, patient, and willing. And I am. I've never been more certain about anything in my life." She felt the same certainty blooming inside her, fragile yet undeniable. "Then we'll start here," she whispered, "with this moment, with honesty, and with hope." The night stretched on, the silence between them no longer heavy, but comforting. It was filled with understanding, warmth, and a sense of connection that had been missing for far too long. She realized that the end she had expected had never truly existed. Tonight wasn't about endings, it was about beginnings, small and deliberate, built on honesty and care. And just when she thought the night had found its rhythm, she sensed another shift. Something unspoken lingered, a subtle energy that made her pulse quicken. She couldn't see it, couldn't name it, but she felt it, a moment poised to change everything again. Her heart beat faster, and a quiet smile formed on her lips. This night wasn't over, not by a long shot. It held one more heartbeat, one more word, one more moment that could redefine everything. And in that suspense, in that delicate pause, she realized she was ready to see what came next.